Welcome to Grandma's Verdict, and we invite you to watch a video with our new original story. Natalie sank onto the park bench, stretched out her aching legs, and turning her face to the sun, closed her eyes. She had loved this game of hide-and-seek with the celestial body since childhood. It was interesting to feel her skin gradually warm up, as if filling from the inside with something dense. And through her closed eyelids a bright haze penetrated, colored with flickering dots, spots, and zigzags of elusive colors. But after a couple of minutes, she had to cover her eyes with sunglasses from the unbearably bright light. "Oh, what a sun today, just like in summer," Natalie thought with surprise. Before we continue, a big request to like this video. Your support is important to us, thank you. Enjoy the story. Has spring finally arrived for real? The incredulous surprise was understandable. This year, nature had tested the resilience of the big city's residents for an especially long and sophisticated time. In early March, it traditionally smelled of real spring. The first puddles glistened. The packed, tired snow began to rapidly settle and shrink, getting dirtier by the day. But as soon as people brought home festive bouquets of tulips, winter seemed to remember itself and dropped the temperature by a couple of dozen degrees. The puddles turned into skating rinks, and the melted, lopsided snowdrifts into dirty ice ramparts that could cause serious injury. To destroy the remnants of spring optimism, snow began to fall from the gray sky that had descended almost to the rooftops, seeming to push spring back by at least a couple of months. After tormenting people in this way for several days, nature switched back to spring mode. The transparent and bright celestial vault instantly soared upwards, and from it poured warmth, furiously soaking everything below in streams of dirty meltwater. The attraction, called "Guess What Season It Will Be Tomorrow," continued until mid-April, driving to despair the owners of stiletto booties, studded car tires, and parents who had completely stopped understanding how to dress their children. And now, finally, the real bright and warm sun had been generously pouring its light for several days on the confused and completely disbelieving people: dogs and cats, sparrows and pigeons, grass and trees. All the bad things were immediately forgotten, and the greenery brightly spotted the lawns of the large park. Tireless, optimistic dandelions shot up, the birds chirped deafeningly, and the main evidence of spring, the fresh, moist, completely special air, confidently declared, "That's it, spring now for sure." And finally, Natalie inhaled with pleasure a large portion of that very tasty, fresh, not at all city air with the smell and taste of spring, lowered her eyes, and let out a surprised "oh." Directly in front of her stood a creature with completely human, shining eyes that clearly said, "Well, are you enjoying it? That's right, there's something to enjoy. It's good, isn't it? And if it's good, why are you sitting there? Get up, come on, let's jump around. Oh, what a boring, lazy lump you are." It was a large Labrador dog that was looking at Natalie and smiling. Yes, the dog was clearly in a wonderful mood, and its dark lips, standing out against its light, shiny in the sun fur, were stretched in a real wide and sincere smile. At least, that's the impression the dog's face gave. "Hello, what a handsome boy you are." Natalie involuntarily exhaled, looking at the magnificent dog with long golden fur wagging its tail. Playing? Well, of course, such weather in spring at last, right? We'd almost given up on it. The dog snorted loudly, clearly agreeing with the stranger's opinion of himself and the weather, and picking up a decent-sized branch from the ground, rushed off to the side. Natalie involuntarily followed the running dog with her eyes, its fur shimmering and shining like silk in the sun, and in motion, it seemed like a precious cloud flying through the air. Jumping over a low curb framing the pedestrian path, the dog ran out onto a clearing about 30 paces from the bench where Natalie was sitting. There, on the dried grass, several human figures were moving. From the confidence with which one of them took the branch brought by the dog, Natalie understood that the golden handsome boy had clearly returned to his owners. The dog, whining, darted and jumped between the people, 2 adults, and 2 shorter ones dressed in colorful jackets, obviously children. It looked like a family of a mom, a dad, and 2 little ones, accompanied by their pet, had come out for a spring walk. The picture was so bright, attractive, and ideal that it attracted Natalie's attention for a long time. Now she could see well that the little ones, a girl and a boy of about 5 or 6, were chasing the dog at a run, obviously brother and sister. They were very similar, fair-haired, snub-nosed, moving together in a well-played and coordinated group, and laughing in a chorus sonorously loudly. A very slender young woman in a light-colored coat was watching them from the side. A scarf was thrown over her shoulders, slightly tangling her freely flowing, shiny long hair. Soon she lifted her dark glasses from her face, leaving them on her head like a headband. And it became clear that she was beautiful, and that the little ones running around with squeals were most likely her children. In any case, the woman's gaze, attentive and soft at the same time, with which she constantly watched the boisterously having fun company, and the quiet shouts with which she tried to stop the wave of fun, spoke in favor of this. And finally, the fourth member of this group, a young man. Here Natalie, with purely feminine curiosity, looked more closely, especially since there was someone to look at, in the sense that the man was quite remarkable. A few minutes ago, he had picked up both little ones in his arms at once and, spinning them on an impromptu carousel to the general friendly laughter and the sonorous barking of the dog, had set them on the ground. Now he stood almost motionless, as if giving her the opportunity to see him in all his details. Tall, well-built, broad-shouldered, not exaggeratedly, not excessively, but exactly as a man should be, he gave the impression of strength and calm even at a distance, what is usually called by such a simple and at the same time so difficult to understand word as masculinity. His light hair, disheveled after another rather swift dash after the company of children and a dog, lay in a picturesque mess, covering his forehead. The barely noticeable stubble, shading the line of his cheeks and chin, did not spoil him at all. From under his unbuttoned short coat, a white turtleneck sweater could be seen, which very effectively emphasized his whole image. His eyes were covered with sunglasses, but for some reason there was no doubt that when he took them off, his appearance would lose nothing and most likely, on the contrary, would become even more effective. In general, the young man was handsome. If he turns around now, smiles, and it turns out that he has white teeth in addition to everything else, then I don't even know. It will just be some kind of horror, Natalie thought disjointedly, continuing to secretly watch the stranger. He turned, raised his head and smiled broadly. Yes, his teeth were white, and his smile seemed to light up his face. Oh, there are such people in the world. Again, something disjointed arose in her head, and without thinking it through, it disappeared. These are not even people. Some illustration from a glossy magazine or a scene from a stupid family series. Natalie suddenly became angry at the innocent strollers. Meanwhile, the reasons for her involuntary, foolish irritation had increased. The man, waving his hand towards the dog and the children, approached his companion and said something to her. She laughed merrily, gracefully raised her hand, and brushed a speck of dust, visible only to her, from his shoulder. And he, with a careful, gentle movement, adjusted a strand of her hair and hugged her by the shoulders. Natalie suddenly felt her eyes begin to itch. Well, I don't need to start crying here in front of everyone, she thought angrily. To hell with them. Natalie suddenly decided and even turned away a little so as not to see the simply stunningly beautiful picture. And then Natalie honestly admitted to herself why the innocent scene playing out nearby had caused her such strange feelings. It was not annoyance, not irritation, but simple human envy. Natalie was sitting on a park bench and sincerely, desperately, and with a pang envied these beautiful, happy, carefree people, enjoying the spring and each other a few steps away from her. It's just that in Natalie's own life, there had never been anything as beautiful, imbued with a familiar, unobtrusive, but no less noticeable tenderness. There was nothing as sincere and sensitive to the one next to her. Nothing that would make her want to hold a dear person close, look into his eyes, and sighing happily smile. There wasn't even anything remotely similar. On the contrary, her whole life, at least for the last few years, had turned out to be a parody of everything that is considered to be life, love, and family. The same parody as her mother-in-law's little dog now seems to be. A small, overgrown with coarse brown fur, vicious, slobbering creature on crooked little legs, compared to the tall, graceful, handsome Labrador, resembling a golden ribbon shimmering in the sun over a spring meadow. Natalie was born into a family of the kind that is usually called simple. They had no special wealth, no unusual family traditions, no age-old heritage of ancestors, or anything else that would distinguish the family from others. Natalie's father, Frank, worked as an engineer at some large factory, and her mother, Irene, was constantly away on business trips. But for the time being, Natalie was not interested in this. It was important to her that her father came home every day, washed off the dirt and the smell of something oily, which, by the way, continued to seep through his skin even after a bath, and would pick her, Natalie, up in his arms, spinning her around the room. Then her mother, if she was home, would call them to dinner, though without any special frills, serving mostly pasta and sausages on their plates, but that didn't matter. Natalie tried to swallow her food as quickly as possible, so that she could then pull her father away from the table and do a bunch of interesting things with him. Sometimes it worked and sometimes not. Her mother often interfered, sending Natalie to her room and having incomprehensible, loud, and clearly not very pleasant conversations with her father behind the closed kitchen door. After a while, her father would return to Natalie. True, she already had to go to bed, but she still eagerly awaited the moment when he would tuck the blanket around her, move the hair from her face, and, smiling, sing her a lullaby. When Natalie grew up, she began to understand that their family did not quite fit into the category of ordinary and normal. After all, in the ordinary and normal families of her classmates, girlfriends, and acquaintances from art school, the roles were distributed somehow differently. Fathers did not do the laundry and iron, did not run to the shops and parent-teacher meetings, did not stand at the stove in the evenings, trying to whip up something from the products available in the refrigerator, did not check school lessons. No, of course they could also do all this or something separately, but not constantly, not every day. In ordinary families, mothers did this, and in their family for some time now almost everything was done by her father. This understanding finally came to Natalie at about the age of 10, when Frank, hopelessly entangled in her long hair, almost crying, cut off a small but noticeable strand with scissors, and then apologized for a long time to his sobbing daughter. "Dad, why are you even braiding my hair? Why is Mom never home?" Natalie finally asked. "Well, sweetheart, you know our mom has a special job. She doesn't have time for housework," her father answered. "And she doesn't have time for me either," the girl said sternly. "So for Mom, work is more important than us, both you and me." "Why would you say that?" The man shook his head. "Mom loves us. It's just, you see, Mom loves her job too and doesn't want to quit. And you and I, well, we're still together." He would end the unpleasant and difficult conversation cheerfully. Irene, Natalie's mother, worked as a senior flight attendant on long-haul flights. She had been traveling the country her whole life, since her early youth, since she had first started working part-time. And so it happened that she really liked this life. "Why should I give up my profession and my favorite thing to do?" Irene was genuinely perplexed in response to her husband's timid reproaches. "Natalie is growing up without a mother, but she has a wonderful father. You know, frankly, I didn't insist on having a child. You wanted a daughter. So you got one." No, Irene was not a completely useless mother. On the days when she was at home, she tried her best to make up for lost time, but she did it rather awkwardly, clumsily, and in the opinion of the growing Natalie, excessively intrusively. She would start a pointless, fussy cleaning, after which they would then spend several more days putting the apartment in order. For some reason began to actively sort through and criticize the girl's wardrobe and drag her to the store, buying up everything in a row, including a bunch of unnecessary things, meddled in Natalie's lessons and grades, although she herself was constantly making mistakes, for example, calling her 7th grade daughter a 6th grader. But worst of all, in Natalie's opinion, was when her mother started cooking. Under her father's pitying gaze, the girl would struggle to swallow the greasy, over-salted, tough as a boot sole cutlets, and then suffer from thirst and heartburn. And she would secretly count the days and hours left until her mother's departure on another trip. Her only desire was to be left with her father, his quiet, calm voice, his simple but honed over the years of loneliness cooking, and his loving gaze. Until about the age of 15, Natalie was sure that despite the strangeness of the relationship and the distribution of duties in their family, everything was basically fine. She honestly tried to help her father with the housework, tried not to get sick, learned to cook, to clean, and not to cause him any particular trouble or worry with her studies at school. He seemed to be quite content with his life, and she thought so for a long time, until one evening she accidentally glanced into the kitchen and saw her father motionless, frozen at the empty table. Frank was sitting with his hands in front of him, staring at the completely dark window with a blind gaze, the same as the darkness behind the glass. Slightly slumped shoulders, a stooped back, his hair starting to gray at the temples, even the way he held his head. There was something so sad and tired in all of this that she was frightened. "Dad, what's wrong with you? Are you sick?" she asked quietly. "What?" Frank flinched and muttered. "No, what are you talking about? I was just looking, our windows are so dirty. We should wash them on the weekend." He looked up at his daughter and tried to smile as usual, but Natalie could never forget the expression in his eyes that had flashed before her. An expression of anguish and hopelessness. Soon Frank and Irene separated, which was a logical conclusion to their very peculiar marriage, in which, in general, they had never been together. The question of who Natalie would live with, of course, was not even raised. Having become free, Frank never found the strength or desire to turn his fate in another direction, to get something out of his life. On the contrary, it felt as if the divorce from Irene, with whom he, it seemed, had never really lived, had finally broken him. He began to drink a little, quietly and alone, as he did almost everything in his life. Natalie watched with pain this barely smoldering fate of the only person dear to her, but she could do nothing. "Natasha, sweetheart, don't worry about me." Frank suddenly smiled. "I'm fine, even good. You won't believe it, but I met a nice woman here, you know? So maybe I'll get married in my old age." He laughed, but for some reason, neither she nor, apparently, he himself felt any joy from this laughter. Although the woman whom Frank had mentioned did indeed appear. To Natalie's considerable surprise, she soon met her. A lively, rosy-cheeked, plump, cheerful Nadia was so unexpected and unusual in their apartment that Natalie did not even believe her eyes when she saw her for the first time. She did not believe and was wary. But after observing her father and his lady, she breathed a sigh of relief and relaxed. Frank came to life, gained weight, got a healthy color, stopped freezing in place as if frozen in space-time, began to speak louder, and a completely unprecedented thing, to laugh. Even his hair suddenly stopped looking like a dull old man's cobweb, untidily hanging at his temples, but became thick and shiny again. The empty bottles and the feeling of complete hopelessness and emptiness disappeared from the apartment. "Natasha," Frank said soon, blushing and embarrassed, "how can I put this? In general, I proposed to Nadia, and she, to my amazement, accepted. I don't know how you'll feel about this, you see." "I understand and I feel great about it," Natalie nodded confidently. "I'm very happy for you, really, Dad. Maybe you'll finally be happy," she said, a word so unusual in their house. From her childhood and youth, from her father's fate, the girl made the only categorical conclusion. For a family to be normal, a woman must devote herself to it completely, otherwise it is not a family at all. Having stopped worrying about her father and entrusting him to the reliable, warm, and gentle hands of Nadia, Natalie focused on her studies. In the last couple of school years, her dormant abilities for the exact sciences had awakened in her. Without much effort, having brought everything else up to the required level, Natalie graduated from school with honors and entered a rather prestigious economic university in another city. She studied with pleasure, finding nothing wrong with the difficult, protracted exam sessions, with the dorm life, or with the chronic lack of money, which, however, her father regularly brightened up with money transfers. Sometimes, distracting herself from her studies to herself, Natalie made several important conclusions. And the main one was this: there is no special beauty in her. So, not devoid of pleasantness, but a rather ordinary appearance. Her hair could be fuller and thicker, her eyes bigger and brighter, and her skin lighter and cleaner. In general, it's not worth looking in the mirror too often, because it doesn't add any optimism. At the same time, Natalie was not too objective about herself. Yes, she was not a striking beauty. But among others, she stood out with a thin, slender figure. She had slightly curly hair of a beautiful, thick, wheat honey color, which her female classmates could not replicate with dyes, no matter how hard they tried. A neat little nose and full lips, the corners of which were slightly upturned. It seemed that Natalie should not have had a lack of male attention, especially with her ideal notes for all subjects, famous throughout the course. But despite all her obvious hidden virtues, for all 5 years she remained alone, with the exception of light, fleeting infatuations lasting several hours or days. Perhaps the young men of the opposite sex were hindered by her excessive seriousness, her focus on things and experiences that are usually not particularly interesting to students. "Oh, that Natalie, she's kind of strange," one of her classmates shared with his friends. "I invited her to a cafe. We're just chatting. And I have the feeling that I'm discussing my future with my own mother. She looks at me or something in a strange way I don't understand." Natalie, of course, was not aware of what was happening, looking at the guys with an adult, serious, evaluating gaze. But frankly, she was not at all worried that she had no student romances. On the contrary, looking at the rapidly forming couples of girls and boys, the stormy relationships and passions, some of which even ended in weddings, she was convinced that she needed something completely different. She needed feelings that were calm, reliable, balanced, based on respect and understanding of each other. Not on a hysterical, "Oh, you're so cool, let's live together." She needed a real, strong family, to which she would devote herself completely, according to her long-established formula. And all this semi-childish student love, hasty, hysterical, was complete nonsense. And the best proof of this is the fact that out of the 5 weddings played on the course, only one made sense. At least, the newlyweds are still together, and all the others have long since scattered in different directions with not the best wishes for each other. Natalie graduated from the university with honors, and life finally smiled at her, rewarding her for her diligence in her studies. She was accepted into a large firm, and after several months of working there as a very modest junior economist, on whom all the unfinished and uncompleted work of other specialists was dumped, she suddenly heard, "Miss, yes, you the blonde one, tell me, is your last name really Dawson?" And speechless with fear, Natalie looked at the short, graying man of about 50, or maybe 60 or 70, who knows? When a person has so much money, he can look any way he wants despite his years. Although in this case, he was still as nature had made him, a man in the prime of his life, who had begun to age slightly and nobly. She knew him, as did everyone who worked in the huge holding. Mr. Carter was the technical director of the company, a member of the board of shareholders, and a bunch of other structures on which the existence of the firm as a whole, and the well-being of each of them in particular, depended. And now this near demigod, who was not even supposed to notice such a cockroach as her, was standing, smiling slightly, and addressing her. Natalie even quietly looked around to make sure it was not a joke or a mistake. "You see, the thing is, Natalie, I was not mistaken. Your name is Natalie, right?" The man smiled again, and she ventured to quietly shift from foot to foot and take a breath. "It seems that I was once well acquainted with your father, with Frank Dawson." "Yes, what am I saying, acquainted? We were friends from the first year, and you know, frankly," Mr. Carter lowered his voice and playfully looked around, as if making sure that no one was eavesdropping on them, "if it weren't for Frank, it's unknown whether I would have graduated from the institute or not. He pulled me through a couple of courses, but he just dragged me by the ears. So in a way, I owe my current position to your dad and my friend." He smiled again, this time really broadly and joyfully, as if remembering something from his distant student past, and continued, "You just look so much like Frank, but just so much. I realized it the first time I saw you, but I couldn't figure out for a long time who you reminded me of. And when they told me your last name and patronymic, everything fell into place. Well, I'll be..." Natalie finally found her voice, so as not to look like a complete speechless fool. "And I'm not talking," Mr. Carter chuckled. Natasha, let's you and I sit down somewhere, and you'll tell me in general terms how Frank's doing, and you'll give me his phone number. And I'll find out the details from him myself." The meeting with her father's old friend became a real springboard for Natalie's career in the firm. Although it must be said, Natalie herself was seriously embarrassed by this unexpected patronage, rightly believing that there would be many who would like to pick at her and Mr. Carter's bones. "Look," they would say, "he's pushing this incompetent girl up the ladder, who knows what she's paying him with." But a few years later, the stupid and malicious smirks disappeared from their faces, because it was pointless to argue that Natalie Dawson was a talented and excellent specialist. Mr. Carter was openly proud of his protégé, calling her the hope of their finances and regularly thanking his old friend, with whom he had re-established relations, for the birth of such a priceless asset. In short, a few years later, Natalie Dawson was the leading economist of a large and prosperous company. She had a decent apartment and many stamps in her passport from crossing different borders. Outwardly, her life was prosperous and successful. But in this life there was not what, in Natalie's own opinion, was the main thing, without which everything else had no meaning. There was no family in it. Of course, over the years, she had looked at the men around her more closely than their common affairs required. Once she even thought that this was it, the very thing she had been waiting for and looking for so long. But, unfortunately, the hope quickly evaporated. That day, work did not go well from the very morning. The computer in her office flickered its monitor at her nervously several times and, with a sad beep, went out completely. The technician called to fix the problem was in no hurry, and Natalie, boiling with anger like an old samovar, became more and more irritated with each passing minute. By the time the office door finally opened, letting in a short, thin man, she had already reached the stage of anger at which words fly out before the head has time to think them over. "Well, can you hurry up a bit?" she greeted the man entering the office. "And maybe you could calm down a bit? And by the way, hello," a calm male voice replied. A short, thin man was looking at her from under the visor of a company cap with the logo of a computer company, and suddenly smiled quite friendly. "Don't worry, Ms. Dawson, we'll fix everything now. But rushing is not the best companion in my business," he said and dived under the table. He repaired the computer and unexpectedly stayed in Natalie's life, as it seemed forever. How did he manage what no one had been able to do before? Let the psychologists figure it out. But it was to him that Natalie suddenly decided to devote her life. Michael was so sincere, simple, and understandable. He looked at her with such admiration. He was so amazed by her achievements and qualities. He admired her photographs against the background of the most famous sites. In general, everything he saw, that she suddenly decided that Michael loved her. So sometimes we mistake the reflection of a lantern in a barrel of water for a guiding star. Michael was from a small village where his mother, Louise, 2 sisters, and a brother with their numerous families still lived. The same countless aunts and uncles. In general, a large, noisy, and direct family in their judgments and actions. It was thanks to this directness that one of them regularly and free of charge stayed in Natalie's apartment, which of course became Michael's apartment as well. For several years, Natalie was sincerely convinced that everything was wonderful and right, until she began to get tired more and more every day, pushing this fatigue inside, hiding it from people and from herself. "I just don't know what to do. I'll probably have to go back home," Michael suddenly announced. "My mother is getting worse. She can barely walk anymore. Her legs have completely given out, and her heart is acting up. Can you imagine what it's like for her there in that village? Although, what's the point of me going there? Of course, we need to move my mother here and wait for a surgery slot. Do you know of a cheaper hotel?" "What are you talking about, Michael? What hotel?" Natalie answered, "Of course. We can give Louise a small room. I think she'll be comfortable there. What do you think?" "Oh, yes, of course. Oh, Natalie, thank you. To be honest, I was thinking about it, but I was kind of embarrassed to ask you." Soon Louise settled into their, or rather Natalie's apartment, bringing with her a tiny, vicious little dog, supposedly so that she wouldn't be so sad and lonely in her new place. And from that moment on, Natalie completely ceased to be the mistress of her own home. "No, Natasha, no caregiver. I don't want anyone to touch me. I'll do everything myself. It's okay, I'll manage somehow. Louise declared when her daughter-in-law tried to somehow organize their life. And then Michael, under some not very clear circumstances, lost his job and simply sat down next to his mother. True, he seemed to be looking for a new place, but at the same time he categorically refused a position as a system administrator at Natalie's firm. "No, Natalie, I won't work on your recommendation. Think what you want of me. I don't want people to look at me as your protégé." Natalie considered this statement strange, but did not argue. After all, there were plenty of jobs in the city for a good computer specialist. But it turned out that there were few, at least for Michael. And what was available, he categorically disliked. So several months passed. Natalie was carrying this whole unbearable burden, proudly called her family life, and she felt that she was about to collapse like an overworked horse. This morning she suddenly felt an unprecedented, even for herself, apathy. A terrible fatigue, some kind of stupor suddenly overcame her. As if on cue, for the first time in 2 spring months, the sun was shining fiercely in the window, breaking through the unwashed after-winter panes. And Natalie was irresistibly drawn out of the office. For the first time in many years, to sneak away from work, to come home and quickly, and if possible quietly change and slip out of the once so beloved and cozy, and now alien and disgusting apartment. Ideally, so that neither Michael nor Louise would notice, and walk in the old park until a fresh spring breeze cleared her head, and until she saw at least some way out of the situation. Natalie opened the front door of the apartment, looked tiredly at her reflection in the large mirror, and involuntarily listened. Voices could be heard from behind the closed door of the room where Louise was lying. Mother and son were talking, and the very first word she heard made Natalie freeze. "And how much longer are you going to lead this fool of ours by the nose? With your job search? You know, with this 'I'm looking but they won't hire me anywhere' thing. Listen, Michael, aren't you afraid that Natalie will figure you out? Maybe you should go out somewhere, work for show." Louise's voice was heard. "Somewhere?" Michael answered. "Mom, you're kidding me. Why do I need that? To go out somewhere and for show at that? I need a real decent place. It's okay, I'll wait, I'll look. It's not like I'm in a hurry. Maybe something really good will turn up." So, he wasn't really looking for a job at all but was just living comfortably at her expense. She was exhausting herself, working like a dog, had turned into a nanny, a cook, a nurse, had given up everything, had given up herself only to hear in gratitude, "This fool of ours." So this was her happy family life, to which she had devoted herself completely. Natalie quietly closed the apartment door and left the building. And so she sits on this bench in the park and has no idea what to do next. At least she doesn't see other people's happiness anymore. It's not so bitter to realize that she didn't have her own, doesn't, and probably never will. "Wow!" She suddenly heard a quiet male voice next to her. With difficulty, emerging from her half-dream, half-reflection on the past, she opened her eyes and quickly squeezed them shut again. First, because the still bright sun hit them, and second, from surprise. A few steps away from her stood a man. Although she had looked at him blindly for a few moments, she recognized him immediately. It was that same tall, handsome man, the head of the picturesquely beautiful and prosperous company of grown children and a golden dog, whom she had been involuntarily admiring before she withdrew into herself. He was standing and looking at her with a kind of frightened, cheerful look. A dandy, Natalie thought without malice, involuntarily noting that his sweater and teeth were indeed white, and his eyes, it turned out, were dark brown, and everything else that she had seen earlier, covering her eyes with her glasses, was also quite up to par. He probably put his fairytale family in an expensive new SUV, and he himself ran for a bouquet of flowers for his beloved wife and ice cream for the children. And here sits such a crow on a bench. "Forgive me, of course, but are you all right?" he said. "Yes, completely," Natalie answered, restraining herself from adding in a grumbling voice something like, "Of course, not as delightful as you, but I'll manage somehow." "So, this is a special coat that you shed in such cases, like a lizard sheds its skin?" He said something completely incomprehensible. She looked at the man in bewilderment, shrugged her shoulders, and stood up from the bench. Or rather, she tried to stand up, but she couldn't. Wow, I must have gotten stiff while I was sitting, she thought in surprise and repeated the attempt. And again she remained where she was, as if chained to the seat. She once again hurriedly lunged up and froze in shock. Paralyzed? A terrible thought flashed through her mind, from which a cold sweat broke out on her. Can it really happen like that? Just like that and you can't move anymore. Although no, I'm moving, but for some reason I can't stand up. What is this? What's wrong with my legs? My spine? This is horrible. And then something strange and outrageous happened. The handsome man, as she called him in her mind, suddenly began to shake all over, doubled over, and burst into loud laughter. He was laughing like a madman, sobbing, wiping away his tears, and his golden dog was jumping and barking quietly around him, and judging by his face, he was also laughing at her, at Natalie. She looked at the couple with indignation and confusion and, rejoicing that the sudden paralysis had not affected her ability to speak, said, "Do you think this is funny?" "Yes, very." He nodded, clearly beginning to calm down, sobbed one more time and asked, "And how long have you been sitting like this?" Natalie glanced at her wrist with the watch and grumbled, more for herself than for him. "Wow, almost an hour and a half. A decent amount of time. More than enough time. It's warm," the man smiled cheerfully. "And the paint apparently is of high quality." Natalie looked around in astonishment and finally saw on the exact same bench, standing about 10 meters further down the alley, a noticeable time-honored sign with a simple and concise inscription, "Caution, wet paint." There was no hope that only one bench in the entire park had been painted. So she had, without looking, plopped down on a generously painted surface, and had even managed to almost fall asleep, and of course had firmly stuck to it. The man apparently had calmed down, although he was still sobbing with laughter from time to time, and now he was standing a few steps away from her, openly admiring her. Then he sighed and said, "Take off your coat." "Well, you know, you're going too far." Natalie was indignant. "Oh, pardon me, I didn't think. You'll obviously go home with the bench." The handsome citizen was amused. "Well then, of course I won't interfere. Or should I still help you carry it?" "Okay, that's enough," Natalie grumbled. "This is not a circus, by the way." She finally managed to stand up, leaving her well-deserved, worn for several seasons, favorite plaid on the bench and yelped, because a very decent spring chill immediately ran through her. "Yes, you won't see that in a circus." "That's true," she heard, and suddenly felt warmth and weight on her shoulders. It turned out that he had already managed to throw his coat over Natalie, tear the remnants of her clothes from the bench, laughing out loud again at the sight of the expressive imprint on the fresh paint, and attach the leash to the dog's collar. "Well, shall we go?" he said, as if they had known each other for 100 years. "I'll take you." "Where to?" Natalie was surprised. Well, where else? He was surprised. "To your place?" "Of course, to be honest, I'm attached to this coat of mine, and I'd like to get it back." And then he suddenly faltered and looked at Natalie attentively. She pressed her hands to her face and shook her head. "What's wrong with you?" He gently touched her shoulder. "No, I can't go home. I just can't. I'm not allowed. I don't understand what's happening. I'm afraid of them. I don't want to," she muttered, and the last words she said in a barely audible whisper, and then she burst into bitter and hopeless tears. At the same time, she almost plopped back onto the ill-fated bench, already considerably damaged by her efforts. The man quickly, but very gently and softly, supported her, not letting her legs give way, handed her a surprisingly clean handkerchief for a guy, and looked with bewilderment at the sufferer clinging to his shoulder. "So," he drawled, "it seems I won't get my coat back so quickly. Well then, that's it. The plan is changing. We're going to find some place now. There was a decent little diner somewhere around here. And you—" "What do you mean, you?" "You'll tell me everything." Half an hour later, Natalie, still sobbing, was sitting at a table in a small cafe and, waving away what her unusual companion might think of her, was devouring a pizza, taking large bites. This peculiarity had been with her since early childhood. The best helper in case of strong excitement and shock was something tasty. It was for this reason that during school and university exams, She traditionally and expectedly gained several kilograms. And now, after a stormy outburst of her feelings, confusion, not understanding what was happening, she, according to an old, good, never-failing tradition, fell upon the food. The man clearly noted this fact, grunted in surprise, and said, "Well, at least I can be calm that if you do faint, it definitely won't be from hunger. 'Kay, your appetite is fine. Come on, tell me, what's the problem?" Natalie wiped her hands and face with a napkin and looked attentively at the person sitting opposite her. "Listen, why are you bothering with me?" She suddenly got angry. "What's it to you, my problems? What makes you think that I'll just go and dump everything on you? I have no idea who you are. Maybe you're even worse than these so-called relatives of mine who have ruined my life? You're no angel. You're hitting on a woman, and you have a wife and children. All you men are the same." She waved her hand and accidentally glanced at the mirrored wall, in which her tear-stained face was reflected, with traces of tomato sauce on her cheek, disheveled hair, and a crooked mouth. The thought that a handsome young man with a slender, stylish blonde with a model-like appearance for a wife could suddenly want to hit on such a scarecrow opened up to her in all its absurdity, and she burst out laughing. "Yes," the man said. "First we cry, then we attack, then we laugh. Your nerves are clearly not in order, but in any case, laughter is better than tears. Well, I'm listening. Or wait, are you not full?" "I'm full," Natalie grumbled. "And why, exactly, are you on a first-name basis with me?" Even after being sated and slightly calmed down, Natalie could not get out of her defensive position. "Well, hello," he shook his head. "After I saved you from the paint, let you soak my sweater in your tears, and saved you from hunger. And after all that, we're going to be formal? Are you kidding me? As an honest man, I should probably marry you now." "Really? Maybe you should get a divorce first," Natalie asked ironically, imperceptibly switching to a first-name basis with him too. "Okay, let's start with me explaining something to you. The woman and children you saw me with in the park are indeed my family, but they are not who you think they are." He again gently but firmly held her hand, because she immediately tried to jump up. "That's not my wife and not my children. Although sometimes these bandits get me to pay for gifts and entertainment so cleverly that I think about adopting them and not torturing myself. Seriously, that's my sister Olivia and her twin children. Olivia's husband is on a business trip right now, so I take them out for walks. Olivia can't keep up with them on her own. There are actually not even 2 of them but 3. You saw it yourself. So I'm not some treacherous husband scoundrel who is looking for entertainment as soon as his lawful spouse is out of sight. And by the way, my name is Paul." Natalie stared at him in amazement. And it was true. They had been talking to each other for more than an hour without stopping, and she didn't even know his name. Although no, now she did. "Natalie," she said slowly. "My name," she specified for some reason, just in case. "Well, I basically figured that out." Paul chuckled and pointed his chin at the table. "And that's Sam, the golden handsome boy, who had somehow gotten into the cafe with his owner, had been quietly lying under the table all this time, pretending to be a rug, but upon hearing his name, he whimpered barely audibly. And then Natalie felt a friendly nudge of a cold nose on her knee, and for the first time in many days, completely unexpectedly for herself, she smiled and told Paul everything, periodically feeling the encouraging touch of Sam under the table. "Yes," Paul said after she fell silent. "Listen, you're just like the bunny from the fairy tale about the ice hut. Don't you remember?" He smirked, looking at her bewildered face. "Well, the bunny who was kicked out of his own hut by the fox. I just can't understand why you can't just throw this whole warm company out on the street. You're Michael and his mother, who is clearly quite a vixen herself. It's clear that they're sitting on your neck, their legs dangling, and cheerfully swinging them. How can I not? What are you talking about?" Natalie stammered. "What if I misunderstood something? And I was so upset that I hardly heard the last words. The main thing is that Louise is really sick. And what will I be after that? I'll have kicked a helpless person out of the house, who can't even leave on her own. No, that's not right. And besides, I saw the papers, the reports, the analyses. She showed them to me. It's all serious there. Papers, Paul chuckled. Natalie, do you want me to bring you a bunch of those in an hour? You'd think you understood something about medical documents. Yes, it seems like a difficult case. We can't do without Peter the rooster. Without what, Peter the rooster? Natalie stared at Paul in amazement, obviously looking for signs of insanity on his face. Well, the one who kicked the vixen out of the hut in the fairy tale. True, that rooster was cool, warlike, with a scythe. But here apparently we'll have to act more with words. The man continued to mutter. Listen, Paul. Natalie, imperceptibly to herself, for the first time said the man's name, shortening it to a surprisingly cozy and affectionate word. Paul, it seems to me that you're a little, how can I put it, crazy. The man nodded cheerfully. Don't be afraid. I'm quite sane. I just really want to punish your lodgers and help you. He suddenly seemed to falter, blushed, and coughing drank a glass of water in one gulp. And why do you need that? Natalie asked, confused. And who knows? Paul exclaimed, completely overcoming his fleeting confusion. Maybe I just want you to finally understand. A real family is not when they put a yoke on you. It's when they are happy to carry it for you. That's it. And I like you. This was a complete thunderbolt from a clear sky. Natalie looked at her reflection in the mirror opposite her again with doubt and smiled uncertainly. So that's it. Paul pulled himself together and spoke clearly and quickly. Tomorrow you're leaving, or even better, flying on a business trip for a few days. Be sure to announce this today in your freeloaders boarding house. Got it? In the morning you'll pack a few things for show so that everything looks natural. Lyrically kiss. Okay, I get it. Just don't hit me, Paul laughed, playfully holding up his hands for protection. So you'll pack, say goodbye, and leave. And be sure to call me so I know the stage is set. What stage? For what, Paul? What are you up to? Natalie was alarmed. A stage for me, the great and unappreciated actor Paul. Oh well, I didn't get into drama school, so at least I'll play a role now. But don't you worry, Natalie. Paul suddenly dropped his playful, ironic tone and spoke seriously. But really, we need to expose your relatives. It's clear to everyone that they are deceiving you, using you, and living at your expense. I've known you for 2 hours, and it's as clear as day to me. And you haven't been able to figure it out in 3 years. And you won't believe anyone but yourself, right? So I have to show you everything so you can hear and see for yourself. In short, do you trust me? After just 2 hours of knowing you? Natalie raised her eyebrows. Yes, of course, completely. Well, that's great. Paul leaned back, and his face lit up with a white-toothed smile. The next day, Natalie did everything as Paul had said. She packed a small bag, said a restrained goodbye to Michael and Louise, and closed the door behind her. Okay, now don't move and wait for my call. She heard Paul's voice on the phone, and she suddenly realized that she was smiling, as, in fact, she had been almost all the time since he had pulled her off the dried bench in the park. Later, of course, Paul told her about the events of that strange day. But for now she was sitting bouncing as if on needles, trying to work, or at least pretend to be busy, and staring at her phone without taking her eyes off it. Oh, for crying out loud, it's frozen again. I'm so sick of this, Michael heard as soon as he left the house. He looked in the direction from which the words were coming and sighed with envy. Not far from the curb was a parked car, at the wheel of which sat a disheveled young man, poking his fingers at the monitor on the dashboard with a contorted face. Is something wrong? Michael asked, approaching the open car door. Not that he was particularly concerned with the stranger's problems, he just wanted to get a closer look at the excellent car, the price of which, as Michael knew, was so exorbitant that it was out of reach not only for him, but probably for Natasha as well, at least for the next 10 years for sure. Yeah, this stupid contraption. They cram it with systems as if everyone is supposed to be a computer genius. The hapless driver grumbled angrily. The damn thing is asking me to enter something, and you see, until I do, I can't go any further. Can you imagine? He slammed his hand on the steering wheel in indignation. Well, actually I can, Michael nodded. If you want, I can take a look at what the problem is. I'm a certified computer systems engineer. True, the man in the car was so happy, as if Michael was not only a computer specialist, but also his long-lost and suddenly found brother, and in his joy, he almost fell out of the car. Oh, please, I beg you, take a look. Oh, well, it's actually nothing special, Michael said after a few minutes. You just need to undo a couple of the last operations and restart the system. Like this and this. That's all. He touched the touch screen on the panel with obvious pleasure and with a sigh got out of the car. Oh, I'm so grateful to you, the driver of the miracle car exclaimed. You were just sent by fate. How much do I owe you? Oh no, what are you talking about? Michael suddenly became embarrassed. It was just a half-minute job. Yes, indeed. The man tapped his fingers on the steering wheel again. You know, the last time something like this happened to me, they kept me at the service center for half a day. And how much I paid for it, I don't even want to remember. What a bunch of crooks. And they take advantage of the fact that most of us, well, just don't know a thing about all these bells and whistles. And in general, it's so hard to find a good specialist like you. I know this very well. I've been struggling without a good computer specialist for so long. Michael was a little embarrassed and said, well, I'm certainly not the best, although in general I know a thing or two. I have a decent amount of experience. Listen, I've just had a brilliant idea. The car owner suddenly became even more animated. Maybe fate really did send you to me, and not just because of the car. Do you need a job? No, don't think that. I'm not going to offer you some nonsense for pennies. I really have a serious offer for you. There's a lot of work, but I pay well. Well, that's kind of unexpected. I need to think about it, Michael mumbled. It was like this with him every time. On the one hand, he knew that he had to get a job sooner or later. But on the other hand, as soon as a more or less decent and most importantly concrete option appeared, all his work enthusiasm would somehow evaporate. And now, if you please, there was a lot of work. He didn't want to get into a mess, but he didn't want to miss such a chance either. The money here apparently was serious. It was enough to look at the car this dandy in a white sweater was driving. Oh, I'd like to discuss all this with you as soon as possible, the man said. It's a shame, I'm flying out in a few hours and for a long time. Listen, where could we sit down and talk? It's kind of awkward in the car and I really want to tell you about my business. While I'm away, you could think about it. Well, since there's little time, let's go up to my place. I live in this building, Michael decided. Oh, great. The car owner became even more animated. Frankly, you'll have to excuse me, but if you hadn't invited me, I would have had to invite myself over anyway, you see? I just can't go any further. He made a playful grimace. Oh yes, of course, come on. Michael remembered himself. Great house, the man said as they were going up in the elevator. Do you live with your family? I'm sorry, he remembered himself, but I wouldn't want to disturb anyone. There's no one to disturb, really. Only my mother is at home, and my wife is on a business trip. Michael waved his hand. And I won't bother your mother too much. The man was puzzled. No, it's fine. It's good for her to be distracted, otherwise she'll go wild soon. Michael smirked. Opening the door, he made a gesture inviting the guest into the living room and said loudly, Mom, come on, get up, stop putting on a show. The main spectator is away. I have a guest, make us some tea, coffee, and whatever else. Louise appeared on the threshold immediately, moving very briskly on her completely numb, partially paralyzed, and almost atrophied legs. Oh, hello, Michael. Why didn't you warn me? I would have baked a pie. You must forgive me. I'm in such a state, madam. The man jumped up, gallantly shook Louise's hand, and she giggled coquettishly, displaying a blush that was unusually bright for a heart patient. Excuse me, one urgent call, the guest suddenly said and began to speak into his mobile phone. Hello, darling. Yes, everything is fine, don't worry. So fine that you will be very surprised. Yes, go ahead, of course, but right now. You know the address? Yes, that's right. This is it. Okay, I'll be waiting. My beloved woman, he explained with a smile, ending the call. She doesn't believe me. She wants to see for herself, to see me off, so to speak, on a long journey. Yes, these women. Michael shook his head sympathetically, not really paying attention to the stranger's conversation. 20 minutes later, Michael frowned in annoyance. Mom, can't you hear? Open the door. And then something completely tragic began. Michael's mother squeezed into the living room with a strange limping gait, her face extremely pale. And behind her stepped Natalie. Oh, Louise, I see you've made a sharp recovery, she said with a smile, a very nasty smile. And to think all it took was for me to go on a business trip. Do you understand what this means? My company is strictly contraindicated for you. The farther away from me you are, the better your precious health will be. So pack your bags and I want you out of my apartment by the end of the day. And take your beloved little son with you. You can use him as a hot water bottle. Natalie turned dramatically and looked at Michael, and a loud laugh came from the sofa from Paul. A few days later, Natalie and Paul were sitting on that same fateful bench on the park alley. Repainted, it had long since dried. And yet, before sitting down on it, Natalie cautiously touched the shiny surface with her fingertips several times. Sit down, don't be afraid, Paul encouraged her. You know, I was thinking, when people ask me how I met you, I can say with a clear conscience that I literally glued you together. He shook with laughter. You and your jokes. Natalie shook her head, also smiling involuntarily. Oh, Paul, seriously, thank you. Although, can I really express how grateful I am to you? Well, actually, you can, Paul said suddenly and very easily. He took Natalie's hands, pulled her towards him, hugged her by the shoulders, and gently adjusted a strand of her hair. You've just forgotten how the fairy tale about the bunny and his little house ends. After the extra ones were kicked out of the little house, the bunny and the rooster began to live together, happily ever after. Paul and Natalie got married 6 months later. The wedding was fun and noisy, and it was a special pleasure for Natalie to watch her father staidly leading his plump, rosy-cheeked Nadia in a dance. And then Frank approached his daughter, hugged her, and easily spun her around to the quiet music. I'm so happy for you, my dear daughter, he said. And I'm happy for you, Dad, Natalie nodded, pressing herself against her father. You know, it seems to me that you and I have finally understood one important thing. She stepped back a little and looked into Frank's eyes. It turns out that true love does not require sacrifices, but gives itself. If you like this story, don't forget to like it. You can also watch our other stories. You will find interesting plots for yourself on my channel. See you soon.